Video is on.
Oh. Okay, if everyone wants to go ahead and mute, that would be great. And then if and when you have questions, please unmute and I will hope to see you. And all right. Okay. All right, we will start with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Nice to see you all. Hello, Tova. So this is a little challenging for some of us because Patricia, Tova, and Helene and I were all supposed to be in Israel right now. But Hashem has other plans, so we are rescheduling for February. They actually just came out with new rules in Israel. You no longer have to apply for application to go. You do not have to be a first-degree relative. So there are still vaccination requirements, but things are loosening up, so we will see what happens. But if any of you are interested in joining me and other lovely ladies, we have space and we would love to have you come with us. So let me know and you can be in touch with me. All right, so a lot has happened since we were together last, which is we started the Torah again and we started Bereshit. So the world has been created. We've already had Adam and Chava. We've had the sin of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We've had the flood. We already had Cain and Abel, the flood, and now we're into Avraham. And now this week we are in Parsha of Vaera. This Parsha of Vaera, and what I'm going to share with you comes from related to teachings from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And the meaning of this week's Parsha is really considered to be that this is the Parsha of the formation of the Jewish people. That even though last week's Parsha of Lech Lecha was about the command to Avraham and Sarah to leave their homeland, to go to a place that they did not know, and the promises that God made to them, that really would have been an individual experience. A lot of people go on spiritual journeys. They don't necessarily translate or transmit to the next generation. I think all of us, either ourselves or know people where we're on a path, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else is on the path with us, that the next generation goes, or that there even is a next generation. And in the case of Avraham and Sarah, they didn't have a child. They didn't have anybody to carry on to be the next person. In this Parsha of Vaera is when the Jewish people is formed. And what we're going to learn about today is how the Jewish people were formed in a very particular quality and characteristic, which we have alluded to in the past, but bears repeating over and over and over again, and specifically for the Jewish people and for our own individual lives. So we all know that Abraham and Sarah were very old when they had Yitzhak, that Avraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90. Now, people always want to come and say, oh, well, they counted time differently then. It's like, no, they did not count time differently then. The days were going the same way as they always have. Everything in the Torah, all the years, everything is the same. And we know that Sarah was old because she herself says, he's an old man and I'm an old lady, so how's this going to work? Nobody said like, oh, well, they're really young. That's just some people nowadays that we think that they were old. They were old. So somebody who is 100 years old as a father, it's true. A 100-year-old man can father a child. Though there is another little aspect, which is that Avraham had a brit milah. And a brit milah, having the circumcision, there might have been a question of whether he was still potent, of what was going to happen after having that surgery, especially having done it on himself, of like what would happen. But Sarah, for sure, there's even a question of whether she even had female organs. There was a question, not only was she old and beyond menstruation, but did she ever menstruate? Was she even able to have children ever at all? So we know that she had given up because we know that she had Avraham take Hagar to have a child through her. so that she said, I will be built up through Hagar, kind of like a surrogate mother, that Hagar would give birth to the child. Now, this is a construct we don't have today, so we can't really analyze it from that social perspective, but just to take it from at that time, that Hagar would be the person who would bear the child, who would basically be counted as Sarah's child. Similarly to with Rachel and Leah, that we have Bilhah and Zilpah who give birth to children who are part of our 12 tribes, and they're credited to Rachel and Leah. They're not considered that they were the of lesser children, or not for Rachel and Leah as well. So it's just a different construction that we want to understand. Okay, so when they give up, and there is real true yeush, that's called despair, that there is yeush, there is despair, that there's not going to be anything happening. And Sarah says, everyone's going to laugh at me. And in fact, God is the one who says, and you will name this child Yitzhak. That's going to be the name of this child, which means to laugh. And the laughter is about coming from a place of the transition from a place of despair to salvation. But that's what we do, is we laugh. And when laughter is the nature of the Jewish people. Now, some people say that's why Jews are comedians, that that we have a sense of laughter. And part of it is true, is that Jewish people, that there's something in our spiritual psyche that makes us see the impossible, like something coming from nothing, a place of despair, and how something can switch around. That will be still many months in the future when we get to Purim, when we talk about the story of the despair that the Jewish people had with the decree of Haman and how that turned around. So I just want to share a personal story about this idea of going from despair to salvation and things turning around. So in addition to the wonderful simchas that we had while we were in Israel, my niece also had a baby boy while we were there. And they had been through a lot of treatments and everything else. So this baby was a long-awaited baby, not the age of 90 and 100 like Sarah, and she has 2 other kids, but this baby had been long-awaited. She had a lot of difficulty during her pregnancy, which I wasn't aware of. At one point, they thought actually that the baby had died, and she was in the hospital. They basically said, I don't know what the whole medical thing was. They were explaining it to me in Hebrew, and I didn't really get all of it. So anyway, the baby revived and was okay. And then at some point shortly before her delivery, she went to the hospital because the baby had turned head up, feet down. And they were like, you're gonna have to have a C-section. This is not good, etc. So it was a big deal. And so my brother-in-law, the grandfather and the father of the to-be baby, went outside and started singing the song from Purim, V'nahafochu, that God will turn it over, God will turn it over, God will turn it over. And they were just out dancing at Yom Kippur, dancing. So people probably thought they were crazy. It's like, you got the wrong holiday. That Yom HaKippurim is like the holiday that is like Purim, but you're not usually singing Purim songs on Yom Kippur. But this is like, we're going to turn this over. Hashem can turn it over. She went to the hospital the next day and was like, we don't know how this happened. The baby turned over. And so there's like, oh my gosh. So they told the story at the bris, and there was just like all sorts of stories like this. Things turn over at a place when there is despair. The Jewish people are the people for whom there is no despair. So interestingly, the word for despair is yeush. The word for despair is yeush. It kind of sounds like despair. It's kind of like yeush, like, ugh, I give up. Not only, and I think one of my friends who's been in our class before has always said that she quoted me as saying that despair is not an option, as if there is a reality called you could despair, but it's not really an option because we're supposed to have stick-to-itiveness, never ever give up. But that's not really what our sages say. Our sages actually say that there is ein yeush ba'olam bichlal. There is no yeush in the world at all. There is no such thing as despair, that it's a smoke and mirrors thing. It's not a reality. And the Jewish people embody that. It says the Jewish people start where the rest of the world's despair kicks in. It says, when there is despair, the Jewish people, that's when we come in and do the impossible. It says, our creation as a nation, as a people, came out of, there's no way this couple is ever having a baby, ever, ever, ever. It's like, really? Despair is not an option, which is why Sarah is taken to task for laughing prematurely when she hears that she's going to have a child, and God challenges us, like, why did you laugh? And she said, oh, I did. And it's like, oh, yes, you did. But it wasn't the laughter of joy. It was the laughter of like, not possible. It says the Jewish people are not the not possible people. We are the like, looks highly unlikely, looks impossible, but it's not impossible. And we are the people who come in then. So there is a reference to in last week's Parsha as well. And we're going to go to that since we weren't together last week. And if you have a Chumash, you can turn to it. It was from Lech Lecha. And it was, you might remember from the Parsha that Avraham gets involved in a war because his nephew Lot is captured. And when Avraham is told about it, he goes to rescue him. And he goes to battle. And it was the battle of the 5 kings against the 4 kings. Yes, from what Rachel Mashori is saying, that's why there's so many seemingly sardonic jokes, especially in Yiddish. We hear the thing that is like, it's exactly that, it's our thing. But it's not just to be like on the Borscht Belt. It's not just like to be as an entertainer. This is a life approach of, it looks impossible to you. It seems possibly impossible to me, but that means that's where I start. That is where I start. That's where we begin. So when Avraham goes to war, it says like 4 kings against the 5 kings. And the truth is, I have to say this part of the Torah always kind of gets me all mixed up, all of these kings, and that there's a lot written as far as text about this war. When he goes to war, it says that that Avraham, this is on page 63 if you are in the Stone Chumash. If not, it is chapter 14, verse 13. Then there came the fugitive and told Avraham the Ivri, who dwelt in the plains of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Shkol, the brother of Aner, these being Avram's allies. And when Avram heard that his kinsman, meaning Lot, was taken captive, he armed his disciples who had been born in his house. And then on the next page, 318. And he pursued them as far as Dan. Now, this is Avraham. He goes with 318 people into a war between 5 kings and 4 kings. There's all sorts of different commentaries of how many hundreds of thousands of people were involved in this war. So I'm asking you, you go in, these are Avram's disciples. It's like, what, like yeshiva bachers, they're going to go in and fight a war? So it's like, that's miraculous. And Avram was successful. He rescues Lot. He prevails. He's the person who causes the win on the side he was fighting for, and they all want to reward him because he's the one who caused the war to be won. And I was like, I don't want anything from you. I just want my nephew Lot, and you can pay my people, but you don't need to. I don't want anything from you. So the question is asked. 318 people is already a miraculous. It's a little bit like looking at the map of the Middle East and looking at Israel and seeing all of the Arab countries around there. Like, this is not possible. This is equivalent to Avram goes with 318 people to fight in a war against all of the existing military powers at the time. It's like, this is not going to work out well. It's like, it is what it is. So that's where he jumps in, and he doesn't hesitate. He doesn't say, well, what am I supposed to do about it? He goes in, and he goes in with his people. What's even more interesting is that this number, 318, is like, why are we told how many people? Couldn't you say approximately 320? Like, we have to know it was 318 people. Like, we don't have that kind of information about other things going on. How many people? 318. So our sages actually say that 318, it actually wasn't 318 people. It was one person. It was Avraham's servant, Eliezer. Eliezer has a gematria of 318, and that's who he took with him. So it was really even more miraculous. You thought 318 people was miraculous. It was really Avraham and Eliezer. It's like, so then why didn't it just say Avraham and Eliezer? Wouldn't that have been nice? Avraham took Eliezer, and they went, and they did this battle. Then everyone could truly appreciate the miracle. Why hide it? in the number 318. So there's a beautiful connection, which is that the word Yeush equals 317. 317 is the gematria of Yeush. So I'll give you that in case you want to know, to put this, make this your magic number that you think of, like I'm a 318 person. Yeush is Yud equals 10, Aleph equals 1, Vav equals 6, and Shin equals 300, for a total of 317. Yeush is 317. What did Avraham take with him? 318. We don't do Yeush. We are the 318 people. We are Eliezer. I'm happy also to share this. This week is my husband's birthday, is on Shabbos, and his Hebrew name is Eliezer. He was actually born during Parsha of Vaera, and interestingly, his parents had no knowledge of this when they named him. He wasn't named a name for anybody. They named him Eliezer. He was born for Parsha of Vaera, and Parsha of Vaera, which is next week, is the entire story of Eliezer going to look for a wife for Yitzhak. So we only discovered this a number of years ago. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. You were born during Parsha of Vaera. Your name is Eliezer. So his parents were really surprised. So God works in mysterious ways. But this Parsha is also Eliezer, and his English birthday is this Shabbos, and next Shabbos is for his Hebrew birthday. So anyway, this Eliezer, this name is 318, and it has to do with not falling into the trap of Yeush, but more than not falling into the trap, it's seeing despair for what it is, which is it's not a reality. When it says ein makom, there is no place for Yeush. It doesn't mean like, no, you have to have like, you have to have gumption. This isn't like you have to have gumption because there is such a thing as Yeush and you have to fight against it. It's saying Yeush and despair isn't a reality. It is smoke and mirrors. It is smoke and mirrors. It says in this week's Parsha of Vaera are all of the stories that have to do with the creation of the Jewish people, because the other thing that is in this week's Parsha is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah that results in the saving again of Lot, but then we have Lot's daughters who are with him, escape from in the caves and are with him, and they despair that there's no people left and that they need to father children in order to have humanity go forward. It's like, well, that was kind of a strange scenario, but they did it, and they gave birth to Moab and to Ammon, which Moab, which means from my father, and Ammon, the people, the nation. And it is from Moab that we have the creation of Ruth, and then King David, and the entire line of Mashiach. So it says Mashiach came this close to not coming into existence because it had to come from Lot. It wasn't just like, oh, let's see, where will it come from? It had to come from that place. And it had to come in some weird, strange way, but it had to come. So it says not only just the creation of Yitzhak and all of the descendants to create the Jewish people, but also the line of Mashiach, which is the ultimate purpose of all of creation. So everything in this Parsha is about, these Parshas are about the something from almost nothing. And that something from almost nothing is who we are. So of course I have to think about Israel. Israel is the startup nation and all of their discoveries, even the fact now that they're creating water out of air, and they're doing that. They're just pulling the water out of the air, and they're doing that in Africa and places where there's drought, because the water is also pure. They don't have to worry about contamination. And it's not like, oh, the Jews are so amazing. It's the mindset that says, this looks impossible, but it's not. That's just a figment of our imagination, and it's smoke and mirrors. So they're like, well, of course you can take water out of air. I mean, if you remember that, there is water in air, so you must be able to get the water out of the air because there's water in air. So what's the problem? So that's the Jewish approach is, so what's the problem? It's just a way of moving forward. So all of us, I think, over these past couple of years, not just limited. I mean, the coronavirus has tested all of us in different ways, but all of our lives, from the time we were children, have been filled with moments where we felt a sense of despair, that things, it's not going to be. So it may not be the way we had thought it was going to be, but to give up prematurely which basically means to give up at all is not an option because it's not real. So does this mean that things always work out? It's like, it doesn't mean that, because it doesn't mean that things are going to work out. It just means that our responsibility is to not give up. And then it'll be whatever, God runs the world. So I've created this new song. A lot of people had this conversation with somebody. A lot of people are very content and totally buy into the fact that God runs the world, like the cosmos and the nations and all this stuff, but they're not so convinced that God runs my own personal world. It's like, you can have the whole world and I run my world. I run me, but you can have the rest of the world. It's like, it doesn't work that way. So the song is God runs the world, God runs the world, God runs the world, including mine. So that when we understand that God is running my personal world as well, then I have to say, then what's my role? If God's running the world, so what do I need to do? It's like, you need to not give up. It will be what it's supposed to be according to God's plan, and we don't know what that is, but our role is to not give up and to keep doing whatever it is we can do, and to find that one little thing of whatever it might be. We don't know. So the rabbi who listened to this class from, and I'm sorry I did not write down his name, but this did not come from me, related a story that happened about 50 years ago in the United States. Congress was actually considering legislation to completely outlaw kosher slaughtering on the grounds that they thought that it was cruel to animals, which just as an aside is the opposite. I mean, it is the opposite. But it was getting pretty close to passing. And basically the Jewish community gave up because at 50 years ago, things were a little different in the United States, where the clout was of the Jewish community. We didn't really have it in the same way. And, then people don't want to do anything because then you're going to cause anti-Semitism, and people start backing off when they should be moving forward. So there was a man named Moshe Sher, and he wasn't in charge of anything. It wasn't like he was the representative of the Jewish people, but he was a person. I have to have my husband find out if he's related to Rabbi Chaim Sher, who's a rabbi here. I'm guessing he is because I think they're all related. But his name was Moshe Sher. He was just a guy, and he went personally himself to all of the members of Congress and made appointments with them, and came in with the demonstration, the proof to them that the shechita, the kosher slaughtering, is humane, and how the animals treated and what they did. And he went with the whole thing. He just went around to everybody, and the legislation was not passed, and that was the end of it. So even though there have been the states like California who are always looking to try to outlaw it and outlaw Brit Milah and doing all these things, there's not been a national effort since then, since his work. It's like, who's he? It wasn't like he was the head of, Kosher USA. It was nothing. He just went in as a person to do this. It's like, what even gave you the thought that you could go in? It was about 50 years ago, Janice. I'm not sure exactly the date. He said 50 to 60 years ago. And things were very different in the kashrus world, and the strength of the Jewish community. So he did that. So then someone asked, was like, what gave you the idea that you should do that? And he said, because of the way I came into this world, my life. So what happened says that this Moshe Sher, his father died when he was an infant. And so he was raised by his mother, and they were very poor, and he got very, very sick as a child. And his mother took him to the doctor, and the doctor said, there's only this one medicine that would help him. It's the only thing we can do for him. Otherwise, there's nothing else we can do. So the doctor wrote out the prescription. The mother took it to the pharmacy, and she said, I don't have the money to pay for this. As he said, this was before Obamacare. It's it's too bad. If you don't have the money to pay for the medicine, you don't have the medicine. So she said, I'll do anything. I'll wash the floors. I'll come straight in the store. I'll clean, whatever, but I have to have this medicine for my child. So the pharmacist gave it to her, and she was leaving the store and running back to the house to give it to her child. And I don't know, she ran into somebody somebody accosted her and grabbed the bag out. I guess it looked like it was from a pharmacy, and somebody thinking, I don't know, it was drugs or whatever, took it from her, opened it up, like drank it, and then spit it out and threw the rest of it on the ground and shattered the glasses. If you remember from when we were little, that prescription medicines came in glass bottles, that threw it out. So now she had no medicine. She went back to the pharmacist. Now, anybody else would have been like, it's hopeless. Like, what am I supposed to do? Now I have this medicine. I didn't pay for it, and now I have nothing. She went back and she told the story. I don't have it. It broke, and I have to have it. I'll do whatever it takes. And she had like the bag, and the person that she was talking to was a different person, who ended up that he was really the pharmacist, that the person who gave her the other medication was not a pharmacist. He was like an assistant person just working in the store, and he was behind the table, and he said, or behind the counter. And the pharmacist says, I'll give you the medicine on the condition that you don't file any complaints against us for giving you that other medication. What you had would have killed your baby instantly had you given it to him. So she was like, I'm not saying anything. So she got the new medication, took it home, gave it to her son, who now grew up to be this Moshe Sher, who went to Congress. So he said, my own life hung on my mother not giving up. And when things were like this close, that I almost had medicine that would have killed me like that. And instead it turned around and she went back like, I need this medicine. And she got the medication that he needed. So that's how I came into this world. That's how I grew up. My life was spared because of this situation. So I'm like, there's no such thing as despair. It's like, okay, so what should we do? So we go to Congress, and so we go and we talk to everybody. It's like, who are you? You're not anybody. It's like, I'm Moshe Sher. So that's how it happens. This is a mindset. This is the mindset of 318 of Eliezer. And the word Eliezer, it's not just that it was his name. Eliezer means that the word Ezer means help. You know, Eliezer is like, God is going to help me. God is my help. Eliezer. So this is the name. Is like, when we go forward, it's like, are we going forward on our own? It's like, no, we go really with the strength of God. And God is like, okay, what's your part? Your part in here is to not give up. This goes as far as when King Hezekiah, many centuries later, King Hezekiah was, he was visited by, no, it's right. Hezekiah. No, it was King. Now I just forgot his name. I apologize. My jet lag is showing here. It's a king who had done evil, and so if somebody knows, Rose, if you know, or somebody knows, Esty, of that the prophet came to him, and the prophet had told, God had told the prophet to go to the king to tell him that he was going to die because he had not had children. And he had not had children. And the king said, well, the reason I didn't have any children is because I had an image, I had a vision that my child was going to be evil. Maybe it was Hezekiah. Is that right, Hiskiyahu? Anyway, it's in the Chumash. I mean, it's in the Tanakh. So he says, well, that's not your job. Even if you know and have a prophecy that your child is going to be evil, your job is to be fruitful and multiply. You are supposed to have children. And he said, like, and God is going to kill you. He says, I'm not giving up because I have a tradition from my great-great-grandfather, King David, that you don't give up. Even if the sword is against your neck, you don't give up. And says, why did King David have that? Because King David himself came so close to not coming into the world, because he's a descendant of Lot and Moab and Ruth and all these other things. Like, we come from the bad side of the story. It looks like despair. It looks like we should be giving up, and we don't give up. So in this case, it says the prophet's daughter, it's always the prophet's daughter, marries the king. They have the children, and he was right. He did have an evil son. He said, but guess what? That's not your business. That's not your problem. He had a very evil son, and he was right. He says, but your job is not to kind of outmaneuver God and try to make predictions. Your job is to do your job. And your job was, you were to have had children, and you should have tried. Now, if you can't have children, or you're not married, you don't have children, that's a whole different thing. But if you are, then you are supposed to go ahead and do that. It says, our peoplehood comes from being just this side of Yeush. We are just on the other side of 317, just when everybody else is like, oh, this is a 317 despair situation. It's like, but we're 318. We go to Eliezer. we go like, there's no such thing as not having hope. When we embody this and incorporate this, what it actually does is it unleashes incredible creativity, because our minds are going to do something. They're going to do something. Either they're going to busy themselves, it's going to busy ourselves with predictions about how bad things are going to be. I wrote about this in our book of Living in the Present Moment, that you can either go in the realm of predictions or preparations. And those are the two options. You can either, it's like, oh, this is going to happen and that's going to happen and this is bad and this isn't working out and blah, 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 blah. And we try to write the script. Or we say, what can I do? What can I prepare? What move can I make? What action can I take? Which attitude can I have? These are two diametrically opposite viewpoints, and they lead to two very different lifestyles and lives and results. Again, we're not responsible for what happens. We're responsible for making those efforts. And the efforts we make are going to be what changes the trajectory of how the world goes. So the Jewish people are meant to be the ones who embody this anti-Yeush, not just because we're so strong and we're going to fight against it, but to recognize it's not even a reality. It doesn't really have an existence. It is something that is conjured up in our heads, because we take all of the scenarios that are going on and we come to conclusions about them. Well, this means there's no hope. It's like, no, it doesn't. Why do you say that? It also means this is the time to take action. But having that requires an effort to remember that that's the reality we live in. This Parsha of Vaera, is all about that. Avraham and Sarah, Yeush, they're not having a child. Oh, well, here they are. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, there goes King David. Oh, well, there you go. Here he is. All of these things are about the creation of who we are, and what gets set in at the beginning is what fuels it for the rest of time. That is who we are. Each of us probably has stories even about how, here we are sitting here, some of us in Colorado, some of us wherever we are, in Baltimore, we're different places, and Lakewood, we have people from all over, and here we are, and yet how did our families get to where they are? Like, what was somebody did something that enabled us to be here, or a decision that you made yourself to not give up, whether it was like what you wanted to do in your Jewish life. My life is going this way, but I decided to go this way. My family was going in this direction, but I decided to go in this direction. All of these things are about not giving up and not just following into what is a natural path. So the natural path is the one that looks like it is pitted with moments of despair. Because if you look at the world around us, you'd be like, there's a lot that we could have a lot of despair over. There's a lot. You could, go on any Facebook page, go on any news outlet, whatever you want, you will find plenty of reason to feel a sense of despair. The world, the politics, the virus, the whatever, your family, your kids, your parents, your employer, whatever it is, there are plenty of things to be in despair about. So how do we not do that? It's like we say, that's an illusion. It's just an illusion. It's just an illusion. What am I supposed to do? That's the only question we need to ask. And when we do that, the truth is we also, in current terminology, we empower ourselves, because the rest is letting the other circumstances and situations define our reality. And when my reality is defined by what I choose to do, then I am empowered to act. And then I can be a Moshe Sher, nobody person from, wherever New York, decide, well, I'm just going to go to the members of Congress. Well, what makes you think you should do that? It's like, because that's what I need. That's what needs to happen. So it's very interesting. This is not having to do with Yeush, but it has to do with a mindset. Our kids went to Rocky Mountain Hebrew Academy, and my daughter's graduating class had exactly 8 kids in it. One of them being Marcia's son, Jesse. And there were 5 boys and 3 girls. And when you have a small class, everybody does everything. First of all, you have close relationships with all the teachers and with the principal of the school. And you're on the volleyball team, and you're in the play, and you do everything, because it's a small school. So people used to always ask us, like, how our daughter then went on to university on the East Coast, a very large school. And they said, how's it going for her? Like, how long did it take her to, like, that must have been such a dramatic change going from such a small school to a big school. It's like, no, she's used to going in to see the teacher. She was having trouble with one class. She went and made an appointment, went to see the teacher. They're running the Hillel. They're involved in the student government. They're in charge. It's like, because you just are what you are, no matter where you are. So it's like, if you're a person who is used to having a certain approach, you do that wherever you are. She didn't say, like, oh my gosh, now there's like 80,000 people. Like, who am I? She's like, I am what I am. It's like 10 seconds of adjustment. Like, okay, I'm in Pennsylvania and I'm not in Denver, but like, that was it. There was not an adjustment, because we cultivate an approach and an attitude and we apply it to every situation that we are in. And this is the Parsha to really focus on. I'm an Eliezer person, I'm a 318 person, and 317 is Yeush. And it's only a difference of one. It's not like Eliezer equals 965. It equals 318, which is only one more than 317. So it just means to step into, just like take one step into the direction that is the non-despair approach, into its opposite is, what can I do? Not like, oh, what can I do? That's despair. That's not even a question. The question is, what can I do? And then you get the Moshe share. It's like, well, I could call up and start making appointments with people in Congress, because clearly nobody was doing that, because everyone's like, oh, it's anti-Semitic, it's this, it's that. It's like, yes, 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 and yes, that's all true. And so what are you going to do? So this approach is the approach that we are supposed to have in every aspect of our life, whether it's personal, professional, in our families, the community, our spiritual growth. What can I do? I talk to people all the time who have challenging situations in their spiritual growth. They're in families where they have spouses or children who are not on their same page. And they're like, I can't do this because of that. It's like, well, what can you do? What can you do? Not everything requires somebody else. So the other people aren't going along with what you're doing. Okay, that's fine. They're not. So what can you do? And find that one thing, even if it's the smallest, tiniest thing. It changes the trajectory and it keeps you in the place that God wants you to be. And then how things turn out, that's out of our control. We don't know how that's going to turn out, but we always have something. We always have something that we can do. I remember sharing with you that before we started, my husband and I started observing the laws of Taharat Mishpacha, of family purity, of mikvah. That is the one mitzvah that you do need the other person's cooperation, desire to be part of it. You can't do that on your own. So we weren't at we were at the stage of doing it together. So like the one thing I could do was I got the phone number for the mikvah on the west side, which was the only mikvah that existed at the time, and I put it in my address book. I'm like, that's what I could do at that point. So that should something change, be like, well, do you even know where the mikvah is? I'm like, yes, and I have the phone number. I can call and make an appointment, and that's what I could do. And that's what I did. And I kept that I just keep that as a memory. It's like, well, I can write down the phone number. So I can write down the website. I can listen to a class about it. I can think about it. I can read about it. So there is always something that can be done. And we never know what those results are going to be. When Avraham went to battle, did he know for sure that he was going to be successful? He had no idea. He could have been slaughtered. He didn't know. God didn't say, oh, go and I'll protect you. He didn't say that. God didn't say, make him any kind of promises. And then he goes, and then he is successful. Even the way this Parsha ends, which is with the Akedah Yitzhak, of the binding of Isaac, Avraham should have said, never mind child sacrifice or anything else. It's like, how's this going to work out? If Isaac is the one through whom the Jewish people is going to grow and continue, and you're telling me that I'm supposed to sacrifice him, that doesn't make any sense. So he's like, I'm doing what you are telling me to do, and we'll see. It's going to be whatever God says. So he did what he was supposed to do, and that's what he did. So that's how the Parsha ends. at the end, if you look in any chumash or most chumashim, they go through the 10 trials of Abraham, the 10 tests. And there's different counts. There's like 10 different lists of what Avraham's different trials were. But all of them were trials of things of like, you've got to be kidding. Like, why do I have to do this? What kind of a scenario is this? So think about in our own lives of what maybe your 10 trials. You're like, are you kidding? I've had like 20, 30, 40, 50 trials. And maybe that's true, probably is. And each of those have been calling upon us to do something or to refrain from doing something, whatever it might be, is to take some sort of action. And it says, and Avraham passes all of the tests. He does what he needs to do in each of the scenarios where it looks like, what? Why do you want me to do that? So each of these things that we come up against is like, why does this have to work out the way it does? So we were saying I said at the beginning that this is a little bit of a challenging week because we were to have been in Israel on a wonderful women's trip. And because of the vaccination requirements, the different things, like it couldn't be. We did everything we could until the last moment. And women were amazing. They really hung in there, really, really hung in there. And then when there was nothing left for us to do, then it was like, okay, then this is not the time. So when's the next time we can go? And then immediately book different flights. Okay, so we'll go in February. And what if February doesn't work? Okay, well, we already looked at May also. So now it's like such a different mindset. It's like, well, I'll just keep trying the next thing instead of like, oh, well, might as well give up. This isn't just going to ever happen. It's like, don't ever say that about anything. And we're not just talking about huge things. We're talking about or life-shattering, earth-shattering things. We're talking about just the everyday things in your life. It's like, oh, what's the next thing? And until the door is slammed and locked, it may be closed, but it's not locked. And if it's locked, so maybe you'll get the key. So until it's like, it's not over till it's over. And we don't even know when that is. What do they say? Say some terrible thing. It's not over till the opera's not over till the fat lady sings and she hasn't sung yet. So it must not be over. So it's not over. So we kind of call it before we need to. And we get, we're premature in that. So the Jewish people were created out of the anti-Yeush, the anti-despair. Not because we're so strong, but because it's not real. So when something isn't real, you don't have to have strength to fight against it. We just need to have clarity to fight against it. And clarity is, on one hand, harder to obtain and easier. It doesn't take strength, it just takes perseverance. And it takes reminding ourselves of the reality. So let this be the Parsha that for us is the Eliezer and not the Yeush Parsha, where we see that the formation of our people is deeply embedded in literally your physical DNA and or your spiritual DNA if you joined us and joined the Jewish people. That is what you joined, that's what you signed up for. So when somebody converts to the Jewish people, they become children of Avraham and Sarah. Okay, that becomes your name. You are Bat or Ben Avraham V'Sarah. So it's not just like, oh, well, what else are we going to call you? It means that you have access to that wealth of spiritual vitality and connection, and that you are just as much. And honestly, when people convert and join the Jewish people, it's just as miraculous. It's like, how did that happen? This person was raised in a Catholic home. This person never met a Jew in their life. This person, their parents said they were disowning them because they're going to burn in hell because they joined the Jewish people. People who join the Jewish people are as much a miracle as Yitzhak. It's like, they shouldn't really be here. And I'm not saying we don't want you to be here. They shouldn't be here because the natural course of the story of their life should not have led them to the Jewish people. Which is why before someone converts, they say to them, are you sure you want to join this people that is persecuted and abhorred by the world? This is who you want to join? And a person has to say, yes, and it's my honor. It's my honor and privilege to join this people. I've heard people who have converted, who other Jewish people said, like, why would you join the Jewish people if you didn't have to? It's like, I'm trying to get out of it and you're trying to get in. That's bizarre. So it's like, what's it getting you? It's like, that's crazy. So that word, that's crazy, that's a little bit like, that's such a Yitzhak thing. That's like so crazy. Why would you want that? It's like, because it's a privilege to be in this camp. It's a privilege to be in this camp. The question about Avraham arguing, do we know if he argued about the binding vows? He did not. He did not because it wasn't a punishment. Now God does say to Avraham, in order to make it kind of to break it to him slowly, he says to him, let me get to this, hold on one second. On page 101 of the Chumash, which is chapter 22, in verse 2, it says, and he said, God said, please take your son, your only one, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, bring him up there as an offering upon one of the mountains, which I shall tell you. So the description that it says, please take your son, your only one, whom you love, Isaac, those are seen as responses to Avraham by God to questions that Avraham asked. When God said, please take your son, that Avraham, which we don't see this part of the conversation, said, which son? I have two, because he had Ishmael as well. And when he said, your only son, your only one, it's like meaning like your firstborn one. And he says, like, well, they're both firstborn of their mother, because Ishmael is firstborn of Hagar and Yitzhak is firstborn of Sarah. And he says, well, whom you love? He goes, well, I love both of them, because Avraham loved both of them. And then he says, Yitzhak. So he kind of breaks it slowly, because he could have just said, hey, Avraham, take Yitzhak and go to Mount Moriah and offer him up. But he starts off slowly and kind of breaks it to him. And he recognizes it, that it is not a punishment. So he doesn't argue with it. It is a command to serve, to be willing to serve, to be willing to give up. Now, when I say my take on this, I don't mean mine alone. The take that I respond to, exactly. And why the Arabs say it was Ishmael. The Arabs say that it was Ishmael, and they celebrate the American stamp that's Al Eids or whatever it is, that their holiday. They celebrate and say it was Ishmael, because they want the privilege that it was Ishmael who was offered, not Yitzhak. Patricia, you want to unmute?
Yeah. So earlier, when you were saying, you were giving the example of Bilhah and
Zilpah,
and how their children were part of the tribes. Well, but that's not the same with Ishmael, correct?
Right. It is not the same with Ishmael.
So
In fact, Avraham, that's the only thing that God questions, that Avraham questions God about, is when God says you're going to have a son, Yitzhak, and it'll be through him that the Jewish people will continue. He says, like, basically, what about Ishmael? He says it won't be through him. I will make him a great nation, but it is not through him. So he is not counted among them. So, and the same thing happened with Esau. Esau is also not part of it. His descendants, even though he was born, from the same mother as Yaakov, Jacob and Esau, but it does not continue with Esau, because Esau sold it. Esau wanted out. He opted out. So when Esau opts out, but for Ishmael, it was like, no, it's going to be Sarah's child, which is really interesting. When people say, oh, the Torah is like so blah, 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 anti-women, that when the women don't count, it's like, seriously, what are you talking about? Avraham had two children, Ishmael and Yitzhak. What's the difference between who gets it? It's like the one who is the child of Sarah. So it is Sarah that is the person who is the critical difference. It's her child that is going to be the one that continues on. I'm sorry, I missed that last chat, the comment. Ishmael made choices to worship idols. Is that correct? So yes, that is true. Because originally Sarah says, I'll be built up through the child that Hagar has. But when she says, it says that he was involved with idolatry, and that he actually tried to kill Yitzhak, that he was kind of, shooting arrows and just kind of barely missing Yitzhak. That's why Sarah's like, this child cannot stay. He will not inherit with my son Isaac. And it wasn't like, oh, now that I have my own kid, I don't want him. It wasn't that. It was the way the way Ishmael was following Hagar, which was very sad, because Hagar had been a protege of Sarah's. She was the daughter of Pharaoh. She was somebody who had chosen, who wanted to come into Avraham's house. It wasn't like she was like, just like the local yokel. She was a princess. She was a very high level person. And she was Sarah's protege. But then when she got pregnant, she started saying things like, oh, I guess I must be more worthy than Sarah. And so she turned on Sarah, and she kind of followed her own path, which we also know, because then when Ishmael went to get married, she had him marry. The mother was like in charge of marrying off the son, and she takes him in a different direction. That all being said, that all being said, Avraham loved Ishmael, and he maintained contact with him. And we know that he maintained contact because at the Akedah, in this week's Parsha, when it says that that Abraham went with, hold on one second. Back on page 101, verse 3 of chapter 22, it says, so Avraham woke up early in the morning. This is the morning of the Akedah, and he saddled his donkey. He took his 2 young men with him and Yitzhak, his son. So the commentators say that the people with him were Eliezer and Ishmael, who had come for a visit, and that's who was there. And it was Eliezer, Ishmael, and Yitzhak. And so they went on this journey. So Ishmael, and then at the end of Abraham's life, which is at the end of Parshas Vaera of next week, then it says, and I'll just read this to you so you can see it, that hold on one second. Page 123 in the Chumash, this is the end of Parshas Vaera, talking about the death of Avraham. And then verse 9, his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron. So it says Yitzhak and Ishmael that Ishmael had done some sort of a teshuvah, at least as far as recognizing that Yitzhak was to be the one who was carrying on the line in that way, that he would be his own great person, but it was going to be different. And the fact that it says Yitzhak and Ishmael, that Yitzhak comes first, that Ishmael acceded to the order of the family, and even just picturing them walking, it says that Ishmael walked behind Yitzhak. And here's the good thing, Yitzhak didn't have to worry that Ishmael was going to try to kill him after Avraham died and to claim the inheritance, that he didn't. So he went off, he had his own life, as we know. He's done very well in taking over the world and multiplying and having wealth, nothing wrong there. But that Yitzhak was going to be carrying on the brit, the covenant, even though Ishmael did have a brit milah. Okay, and that is considered to this day that the Muslims have a circumcision. I know people who are Moels who do that, and they will also circumcise. They'll have people who are Muslim in this country will have Moel do the circumcision of their children, of their sons.
All of them?
So very interesting. So the Ishmaelites, the Muslims, they want to claim that it was Ishmael and not Yitzhak, because it was a tremendous, we're looking again, Janice, going back to your question, we're looking at it, the question is like, why did he say you're not going to kill my son? Like, why did he fight for them? It's like death. But this death was like an offering of a korban, of that this was not a punishment. This was considered being willing to give your life. And in fact, each of us basically has a little mini Akedah several times a day. It says, when we say Shema Yisrael, and we say that we will love God. No, Arabs, no, they do not do the bris for the women. That's a whole different thing. It's not a bris. That has something to do. You're talking about the female genital mutilation. That is not a bris. That is not a bris, and that is not normative Muslim behavior. And that has to do with their issues about sexuality and women. That's a whole other thing that I'm not knowledgeable enough to talk about. But no, their idea of the covenant, they do a circumcision to be like Ishmael, who had his when he was 13, which it says in the Midrash that Ishmael kind of held that over Yitzchak's head. It's like, I had a bris when I was 13, like when it's really hurt. You had it at 8 days when you didn't even know what was going on. I chose it freely and you didn't. It says that the Muslims have their spiritual account. They daven 5 times a day. They have a circumcision. They believe in one God. It's like, okay, they have a form of kashrut that they do. They have a lot of things going for them. There's a lot of things, demerits as well, but they've got a lot of things going for them. It says the Jewish people need to pay attention to what's going on. But I'm sorry, I started to say something else of what we were talking about for Avraham and Ishmael.
We're going back to Janice's question.
Oh, about the not pleading, that it was considered, oh, thank you very much, Patricia. That we do the same thing when we say Shema and we say V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all of your might. We say with all your soul. That means being willing to give your life to serve God. This is what Rabbi Akiva said when he was being martyred. And that he was said like the Shema, he's like, I've always wanted to be able to actually give. Now, this doesn't set well in our Western mindset. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, what are you talking about? I'm trying to preserve my life at all costs. But we're talking about being willing to give. It says it is harder to live your life for God than to give your life for God, because to be killed, al Kiddush Hashem, only happens once. To live your life for God is a 24/7 responsibility. So actually says that they were willing to do that, and that we're supposed to be willing as well. And that the person who was willing also to do it, so this is a fascinating thing, and who did I hear this from? Rabbi Daniel Gladstein yesterday in a class based on the Chidah, who said that Sarah, because we all know she died at the time of the Akedah, because that's the next parsha. She dies at the time of the Akedah, and some say like, oh, she had a heart attack. She was so whatever. She heard it happen. She heard it almost happen. This is a whole other thing that said she felt left out. She felt left out. That Avraham also wanted to give himself, and Yitzhak wanted to give himself, and Sarah's like, what about me? And that the closest she came, it says, and that she said the Shema, and she meant it. And God let her life did end at that time. And so like all three of them were willing to give. And that was also what, it's kind of paradoxical. It is the willingness to give your life, and possibly actually giving your life, that allows something to continue. Because people ask, what are you willing to die for? And if you know what you're willing to die for, then you know what you're willing to live for. And that when somebody can make that kind of a statement, and then whether you live or die in a way is irrelevant. It's just a matter of what are you willing to die for? And that will tell you what you're willing to live for. And that Sarah, it says that hers was the only one that was accepted. Yitzhak was like, don't touch him. Avraham is like, you're not going to do it. And Sarah was the one who then passed away. And then right after that, so kind of getting into Chayei Sarah, that's when Abraham's like, we need to get Yitzhak married, so that there's continuity here, because now that we know Yitzhak is totally on board. I'm on board. Sarah was on board. This is a very strong connection here. It's not just like a passing thing of like, oh, there were these three monotheists who lived in these ancient times. How nice for them. But now we have something solid. Now we have to guarantee that the next generation is going to be there. And that's when it becomes essential for Yitzhak to have not just a woman, but the right wife that is going to continue on and carry on this exact same approach, which is Rivka. And I'll just share this too. My granddaughter is named Rivka, and she had her bat mitzvah celebration, and she did a challah bake with her friends, and I spoke, and I told her, I said, you remind me of Rivka. And if you think of like now this next part doesn't remind me of Rivka, because her family, thank God, which includes my son as her father. So of course I think they're wonderful. But if you think of all the matriarchs, Rivka had it the hardest. Sarah grew up in Avraham's family. They were related. Okay, so she grew up with him, and she had his company, his spiritual influence, whatever they talked about during the night about God, whatever. She had him. Rachel and Leah had each other. They had each other. Rivka had nobody. She grew up with a father and a brother who were scum. And like, where do you come from? How do you come out of an environment? And in our time, when everybody's blaming the family they came from, whatever their lack of privilege was, and I came out this way because of this and this and the other thing. And Rivka's like, the answer to that is, it doesn't matter where you come from. You have a mind, you have a soul, and you have responsibility. And she is the answer to all of those excuses. And so Rivka is the one who goes against all odds, emerges as the second matriarch. And then she becomes the one who is the perfect replacement for Sarah. So that she really becomes the embodiment of Sarah. But she had nothing. She had no structure that created that. She pulled that out of herself. She is the self-made woman. And it's really inspiring to think about that. Because we tend to think, oh, well, if I would have, I didn't have a good Hebrew school education and my family wasn't so into it and we only went to the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yes, that's true. And so what are you going to do what are you going to do about it? So take responsibility, do what you want to do now. You can only tell that story for so long. Because Rivka said like, oh, my father's he's horrible, he's a cheater, my brother's a liar, and they do these horrible things. Like, okay, new. So what are you going to do? So this is a huge empowerment parsha. All of these parshas are, what are you going to do? And I'm talking to myself because I'm looking at myself right now in the Zoom. What are you going to do, Ellyn Hutt? It's your responsibility. And don't despair. Don't say, oh, well, that this is not it's not a reality. It's not an option. So hopefully we can be inspired by this parsha. It's interesting, this week is the week of Shabbos Project. The Shabbos Project, which is designed to bring the Jewish people, Jewish community together. So this is the Shabbos. When you light candles tomorrow night, it says even if you light them just a few minutes early, just a few minutes early, the amount of spiritual light that will fill the world is beyond our comprehension. So there is an effort for this Shabbos, Parsha of Vaera, to do that. So to bring in Shabbos just a little bit early, to have in mind of adding that spiritual light. And spiritual light is always associated with clarity, and clarity is where we keep our eyes and to see reality as it really is, not how it sometimes presents itself to be. Tova, you had a question? Yes.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I said I had a couple, but I'll just ask one.
Okay. I'm sorry.
So I thought I heard you say that Abraham had 10 trials. 10
Yes.
different versions of 10 trials. Did you say
Yes.
that?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So there's a list. If you look in the Art Scroll Chumash, it gives a list of some of them at the end of Parsha Vaera. It'll give you a list of the 10 trials according to Rashi, according to the Rambam. It goes through 10 different tests, and then there's one, but there's a whole bunch of different lists. Some of them are the same. When Sarah was kidnapped, Avraham being forced to go to war, when Avraham was told that his descendants were going to be slaves and suffer and be, the Pesach thing is like, that was considered a trial. Talk about despair. It's like, you're telling me I'm starting this people and then they're going to be slaves for 400 years? Like, why should I bother? That's kind of like, I want you to go down this track, and I'm just going to tell you that your descendants are going to have it really rough and they're going to be killed and this, and I want you to go for it. Be like, help me out of this one here. And Abraham's like, okay, I'm going forward. So take a look. If you have the Stone Chumash, it's on page 100, and it's a list of the 10 trials. It's also listed in Pirkei Avot, the 10 trials, but there are different opinions exactly of what trials are. But they all agree that there were 10, and they all agree that he passed all of them. So I was like, yes, and I'm going to make a list of my 10 trials and what I learned from them and what quality was manifested, because we want to remember also, and we'll conclude with this, the word for the trial is a nisayon, and a nisayon has the word nes in it. And nes means a banner, like is something that is held up for other people to be inspired by, because that's what a banner does. It is a banner, but it also means a miracle. As we're going to have with Hanukkah, Nes Gadol Hayasham, a great miracle. It says that the trials are not meant to oppress people. They're meant to reveal qualities in us that we did not know that we had. God knows we have them, but he wants us to know that we have them. And so Avraham needed to be manifested. And 10 is always, it's not like, oh, let's see how I can, harass Avraham. Well, okay, we'll give him 10 harassments. It's like, no, 10 is a complete expression that Avraham was able to completely manifest himself. And through the 10 trials did that. And when we also see the trials that we have as opportunities to manifest some hidden talent, quality, or to develop some aspect of ourselves that has laid dormant, that we didn't even know we had. People say, I didn't even know I had it in me. What does that mean? Because I didn't know that I had it in me, but God knows I had it in me. And the only reason it came out was because of this crisis. The way of the world is, a lot of things tend not to get developed unless there is some sort of a crisis. It can be a crisis of faith, a crisis of life, whatever it might be. These things are developed in us through trials and tribulations. And instead of woe is me, I've had these trials and tribulations, like, wow, there must be a lot in me. I must have a lot in me that needs to come out and be fully manifested in my life, because we are potential. We have all of this potential in us, and only a small fraction of it gets expressed. Avraham, it says, expressed all of his potential. His name of Avraham equals 248, which is the phrase B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. It says Avraham completely manifested his potential of being created in the image of God in his life. And that's what our lives are for. Our life is not like, as they say, the person who has the most toys at the end wins. It's not even a matter of how many years I live. That's not the measure. The measure is, did I manifest my potential? And my potential is most likely going to be manifested during times of challenge and crisis, because otherwise we follow the laws of physics, which is inertia. I'm just going along, unless something knocks me, and then that gets my attention. So it's not that it's bad, it's just the way the world works. So just like a seed doesn't grow until the outer layer disintegrates and then the potential of the new life comes forward, if you just keep a seed in your pocket, nothing's going to happen. It's not going to grow. It has to be planted. It has to deteriorate and turn into nothing before it becomes a something. That is a nisayon, and it's a miracle. So all of us have those. When we have a nisayon mindset that is focused on nes, meaning both banner and a miracle of going above. A miracle means going above nature. Like, I thought I was this, but really I found out I was that. It's amazing. I found that out. And when we have a 318 Eliezer as opposed to a Yeush, just one step in the right direction that is an anti-Yeush approach, we will have different quality of life, no matter what the circumstances are. So I wish this for all of us. This is who the Jewish people are. It's who we're meant to be. It's what we're meant to show the world. And we're meant to bring it to our home and to ourselves. This isn't just, for, publicity. This is meant to apply to our lives. We are meant to be living models of this approach to life. So God willing, we will be inspired by that, and we'll bring that approach to all of the challenges that come our way, instead of thinking like, well, a good day was when no challenges came my way. Because that day is not really, first of all, anybody I know, that doesn't really happen to them. I don't know, maybe a 24-hour period of time, but if it wasn't me having a challenge, it was someone I loved having a challenge. So then that's a challenge for me. It was funny when we were in Israel, and we'll close with this. I was talking to my daughter-in-law, and she was saying something about worrying about the kids. And she said, oh, until they're married and on their own, and then you don't have to worry. And I'm like, that's actually not how it works. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's a lifetime thing. I remember talking to my grandmother at Shalom Park. She was in her 80s, macular degeneration, in a wheelchair, many things. And she goes, I just still worry about your mom, who was in her 60s by then. She goes, I can't even do anything to help her. I said, that's okay. You're her mother. You are meant to worry your entire life about her. Obviously not to obsess, but that's part of the job description. So no, it doesn't stop when they get married and have family of their own. You just add more people to your list of people you're worried about, because now it's their children and their children's children. It's the whole lot of them. So this is when we have an approach of like, all these challenges are meant for as a personal gift to me, for my personal development. I'm not supposed to despair, and I'm not supposed to think that God's picking on me. It's like, I'm in this world to develop my potential and to manifest it. And that's why I'm here. So I'm here. So as are you. So I wish all of you, we should all support each other in all of our challenges, because it certainly helps to have other people who have a similar approach to that and are here to cheer you on, to not negate the challenge, that it is a challenge, and to help us identify and figure out what we can do, how we can embrace those challenges, and that we can meet them head on. So So I want to wish you a wonderful Shabbos, and it should be a great Parsha of Vaera. And I'm so glad and happy to be back with you, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great Shabbos. And
Good
Tova, if you want to stay on and ask your other questions, you are welcome to.
Thank you, Ellyn. Have
Bye.
a beautiful Shabbos.
You too. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Esty. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Okay, Tova, what were your other questions? You can unmute. You're still muted.
Okay,
There you
now you can
go.
hear me. It's about Moab from my
Yes.
father. So what does that say about Judaism's perspective on incest? I mean, that question came to my mind, so I had to ask.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, that is a forbidden relationship. Absolutely. Absolutely, categorically.
Right.
However,
But look at
there-
this good thing that came from it. It's
yes, because because Mashiach comes from this. It's
Right.
very bizarre. However, the Lot's daughters, they thought that they were not having a romantic relationship with their father. They thought the world had been destroyed
right.
because of the destruction. I mean, they didn't have CNN, they didn't have any, saying like, newsflash, there's more people someplace else. They
Right.
thought it was over. And so it says that they did it l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. And it says it was to trick the Satan. Because the Satan would be thinking like nothing good's coming from this. It's like, actually,
Oh,
guess what's happening here? It's the seeds of redemption. So there's a phrase in,
so it's
I don't remember
perseverance.
exactly where it is. It says, I
Perseverance. I'm sorry.
found my servant David in the fields of Moab. Meaning that's where David had to come from, that because it was part of Avraham, and it was in the merit of Avraham. It was in the merit of Avraham that Lot is saved from the destruction, because that was a piece that needed to be completely manifested. And so it had to be saved. So yeah, it's like a really bizarre story, but so is the story of Yehuda and Tamar. You're also not allowed to have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law. So,
Right.
and also not, and that's the other side of King David from Boaz. So we've got two very
Wow.
weird stories that create not just like, okay, fine, the Jewish people create our kingship and create Mashiach. It's like redemption is going to come from the strangest places. So it's like, so don't, so we shouldn't turn our noses up at any unlikely places. People come from all sorts of things we don't know. So yeah. So you're right. Halachically, you can't say, well, you know what? I want to be just like King David, and so I'm going to have an incestuous relationship, and we'll see where that goes. Like, you can't do that. But how that gets into the story, and also just for the record, that these things all happened before before Torah was given. So before Torah was
Wow.
given, there's also a different kind of thing going on. It's not codified in the same way. It was still considered whatever, but it has a different spin on it, a different flavor to it.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like perseverance in action.
Yes, they were like, what can we do?
Daughters, where they were persevering.
What can we do?
Persevering.
Now, it says that Lot knew that there were other people around, because I don't know how he knew, but it says that he knew, so that he kind of went along with this.
He was drunk, right? They got him drunk or
They
something.
got him drunk. So then the question is, and I just heard this, is that where did the wine come from to get him drunk? They were fleeing the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. You're leaving your house and you're fleeing and you don't have anything with you, but you take a bottle of wine. So it says,
Maybe.
no. Says the wine, no. Says the wine, the flask was in the cave that they were hiding in. So,
Oh,
and like, it just happened to be, it's like, no, God put it there. It says it was from the, I don't know if it was from Garden of Eden. It was from someplace. God put it there because drunkenness had to be part of it, because otherwise it would have, because you have to have at least a semblance that there wasn't knowledge of it. And if it was just like a completely free will, that would have been like even more distasteful. So at least he was drunk. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry,
You're
I just
welcome.
had to, it came to my mind. I'm like, I have this question. It's a weird question.
No,
but
it's a
it
great
came into my
question.
head, so I have to ask.
It's a great question. It's a really good question. So yeah.
That was a great, great, great class today.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great to be back. And we were hoping, so I hope you've seen the emails that we're hoping for
I've
February.
seen the emails. I'm hoping, yeah. February what?
February, leaving Denver on February 14th, which is a Monday,
Oh,
arriving in Israel
Valentine's Day.
on the 15th on Tuesday.
Okay. And going until like the 20, whatever.
24th,
22nd,
yeah.
24th.
Yeah, be back on the 24th.
Okay. Well, that gives
Yeah.
us plenty of time to regroup
Regroup. Some people have
and
already
hope
bought
that
their
Israel
tickets.
loosens up a little bit more even.
So they loosened up already on, you no longer have to apply. You don't have to get what we did, you don't have to do as of today.
You don't have to be part of a tour group. You can go. You can just go. Wow.
So the
Nice.
vaccination requirement is still the same. You still have to have the vaccines. You have to be within the 6 months and all that. So, that has not changed. So
Right.
that was the other reason we set up for February, is because people have gotten their boosters or their shots, that we didn't want to move it too far out and then have it outside of the 6-month thing and worrying about if there's going to be another booster or whatever. So that's why we set February.
Right. So I just have to say, I got a little tripped up when I had a question about vaccinations and I tried Barbara and I didn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I'm
What
just
was your-
saying that
I'm sorry.
I just
What was
wanted,
your
I
question?
was I just have a thing about vaccination because I don't know, you know what I'm going through physically.
Yes, I do.
And I do hear stories about the vaccination, and I tend to be an alternative health person. That's just kind of where I come from. So I was going to go and I was going to get one in order to go to Israel, but I was waiting until the very last second until I knew before I went to go. So I just wanted to know the details from Barbara or from somebody. So in the future, if we need like those kinds of questions answered, is it Barbara or somebody else that we should contact?
Why don't you ask me?
Okay. Okay. I'll just come directly to you.
Yeah, that would be great. And the things also change, and they were also not clear.
I know.
So it was also hard, and we kept kind of waiting to see, because we were hoping that they would go, because we had one person who recovered from COVID. She never had a positive PCR, but she recovered, and she had the serology test, they wouldn't accept it. So that's what we have to work on next. But what is important to know is that.
And I think I had it too, actually, in the very beginning.
Have you had a
I had
serology
a test
test?
and it came back negative. No, and right when COVID started, I lost my sense of taste. And I didn't know why. And then I thought back and I'm like, I had it. I got it right in the very beginning. That was my only symptom.
So Tova, you might want to at some point, not that it's relevant now, because at this point,
now it's years ago. Now it's over a year, right?
But you might still, with a serology test, might still show that you have antibodies from it if you had it.
Yeah, but they're not accepting that.
They
Plus,
aren't.
I did have a test and it did show no. It didn't show them.
Oh, you didn't have
a test a while ago.
An antibody test?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
okay.
It didn't show it. So, but I'm just saying the whole thing. I'm being super cautious because I don't want to mess with my immunity in any way.
I totally understand that. So I will say that the rules as of today, I just got it from Pam. I just got it this morning. That if you have a booster, you can't get it just right before you come. Or this vaccine, it has to be, because it doesn't kick in with the immunity. It's like 3 weeks, 2 weeks, depending on which shot it is. So you can't do it like the day before you come or the week before. It needs to be advanced.
So the requirements today are you need the shot and the booster both. You can't do even with Johnson & Johnson when you
if you have the Johnson & Johnson and you got that, let's say next week, you would be within the 6 months and you would be fine.
And no booster. And no booster.
I don't.
You have to have. You have to have one Johnson & Johnson within 6 months, because that's kind of where I'm tending to go, is one Johnson & Johnson, no boosters.
Okay, so I'm just saying maybe, because the reason people need the boosters is because they're past the 6 months. So people who got Pfizer
Okay.
last February,
Right,
like me, or April even,
right.
my second Pfizer was April 1st, April 2nd. So October 1st, my 6 months were up. They
Okay.
mean nothing. So I actually got my booster in Israel. I got my third shot while I was there.
Okay, so I can theoretically wait until we know, we have a good idea that it's happening, and then get the Johnson & Johnson right before.
You
And that
can.
would work. As
I
of today,
believe,
that would work.
as of today, I believe that would work. You just need to be within 6 months, and you have to have a buffer time for the immunity to reach its
Right.
strength before the trip.
And they're accepting Johnson & Johnson with no.
They
booster.
always have. They have always
With
accepted.
no
Johnson &
booster.
Johnson. Not the no booster. It's the timing. If you would have had
Oh, I
Johnson
see
and
what you're
Johnson a
saying.
year ago, then you would need the booster.
Oh. Okay, but
Whatever it
if
is
for
you
some reason
have,
I was in Israel for more than 6 months, I would have to get the booster.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying. Okay.
and
Got
they're
it.
also, and now the
Thank
FDA
you.
has
That's
said,
clear.
and now the FDA is saying that you can mix them, that you can have the Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and Moderna, you can do a cocktail. So some people are saying that it may actually be better because they're different. And so it's working with different parts
They
of your
might cover
immune system.
different things.
Yeah. It's so confusing.
Thank you, Hashem, for giving us this challenge.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's what I
But
got
yes.
out of your class today.
So that is,
We're grateful for all the challenges it's bringing out, things that we didn't know we had.
we didn't know we had. That's right. But you have to work it. I mean, you have to like work your challenge. You can't be like, okay, I'm sitting here waiting for that. It's like, so then we have to combine it
Right.
with the not despairing. And like, so what can I do? What can I do?
Right.
So, I mean, I got my booster on the slight off chance that the trip was going to happen. And I thought, well, either it will or it won't, but I'll have the
Right.
booster. And so
Right.
now, since it was whatever it was last week, so I'll be covered for 6 months now.
Right.
So I thought, okay,
Yeah.
so then if we go in whatever, and if it's, that's why we set it for February rather than May, because February was going to be closer to people's booster 6-month thing. Because who
Yeah.
knows what's going to happen? I'm like, okay, well, let's not put our planning horizon too far out, because then we just introduce more uncertainty.
Right.
Trying to have
One thing about
less uncertainty.
February is when I went for my birthday. I don't know how many years ago it was now. Almost 3 years? No. Yeah. Almost 3 years.
3 years ago, yeah.
February, I was wearing a heavy ski jacket in February. I'm just saying. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I
It
was wearing
can be.
the heaviest ski jacket I have, and it was cold, that cold in Jerusalem. Maybe not in other parts of Israel.
It can be, and it can
Can
also
be.
be nice.
And maybe, yeah, we don't know. The weather's another thing. We have no idea.
We have no idea. Like, let's just go when we can go. I thought, okay, if we try to factor in too many things, we're going to trip ourselves up.
No, I think that sounds like a good date. I like February 14th, and now I have a strategy, so thank you.
Sure. And the Parsha, it was also picked partially because of the Parsha. The Parsha is Kitisa, which is the golden calf, where the women did not participate and where we
Oh.
earned Rosh Chodesh. So I thought this is an appropriate time because it was about not despairing. Because if people despaired, Moshe was not returning. And the women didn't despair. They're like,
Despair.
we're not participating in this other thing. So this
They
is like,
didn't give up their jewelry.
it's like, we're
Woohoo!
not despairing. It's like, he's coming back. We're waiting. So I
Okay,
figured that was we're waiting, we're not despairing, is a perfect Parsha to have our trip happen after so many cancellations. And
nice. So I don't know if you want to take time here, but I want to hear about your house and how it's coming and all of that. Good
Oh,
stuff.
thank you. It's really coming along. Our time frame, not because of delays, because so far there haven't been any delays in the construction. It's due to be completed next August, the end of August. However, there is another little piece that has to happen, which is the approval process which is government of the building codes, of the fire, electrical, plumbing, all that stuff has to be whatever afterwards in order to get the certificate of occupancy. That's about a 4 to 6 week process. So
After it's built, you mean?
after it's built. So
Mhm.
that takes us to the end of September, and that's when Rosh Hashanah is. So
Oh.
basically that means the month of Tishrei, nobody's doing anything. As our designer said, as soon as it's Tisha B'Av, people are already thinking about Rosh Hashanah and already not doing anything. So that's the slowdown in the government offices, which takes us to the end of October. And that's when our designer will hopefully be able to get in and do the final construction pieces of the cabinetry, the kitchen, closets, all that stuff. And he needs 8 weeks for that.
I see
So
a
that
rental,
takes
I see
us-
a rental apartment in your future for a few months. Yeah.
No, I think we'll just wait to make Aliyah until it's done. So it'll probably be a year from January
Okay.
instead of a year from now, which was a little disappointing, but Hashem runs the world, including mine.
Okay.
But we got to
Alright.
go on site and we took our grandson with us. And we had hard hats and the cranes were there lowering construction
nice.
materials, but we
Nice.
did a very rough walk through all the rooms and saw our view, and we're
Star
very,
view? What kind of view?
our view, which is of,
What did you say? Star.
we saw our view.
Oh, you saw your view. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is the desert.
Total desert.
Desert.
It's Mount Nebo in the front of us, and to the side Jericho, and the other side the Dead Sea, the tip of the Dead
Wow.
Sea. So it's on a cliff. I mean, we're overlooking just nothingness.
Well, you'll put up some great pictures like right by the window,
We'll get we're having,
Colorado mountains.
we have water for the merpeset so that we can have shrubbery and stuff, so we can have some green out there. He said you'll want to have some green to look at because there is no green. No
Wow.
green. So,
Wow.
but it's very exciting, and we went shopping. We went to the design center in Tel Aviv, and we, kind of did a preliminary pick out of furniture and lighting fixtures, and so it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
So now I can really picture it.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah.
It's
You're
exciting.
feeling it. You're feeling it, tasting
Yeah,
it.
I
Yay.
am. And what's
And
happening with your,
Darlene lives close
yeah,
by.
she lives
Same
in,
complex.
no, she lives in Ramat Beit Shemesh, which is like a huge.
Oh, it's already,
it's-
it's
already-
not
yeah,
as
it's al-
pioneering as you are.
No. So she lives near one of her daughters, and they just moved into their apartment that they bought, and we were there at their house with them when their lift came. So that was
Oh,
very
wow.
exciting. It was very exciting.
Wow.
And we
Very
went to
cool.
we went to visit Ted and Jane Brandt, and we went to Larry and Cindy Halperns, and our friends, the Lubchanskis, who also made Aliyah and are living in Modi'in. So we got to see a lot of people, and we just really feel like we're already living there.
That's nice. And where you're gonna live, is anybody there? Are any of them finished yet? Are there people there yet? No.
No, I mean, it's an existing community. It's a building project within an existing yishuv. So Mitzveh
Okay.
Yericho has been there since the 70s. So there's already, I don't know, like 400 families there.
Oh, good.
But this project is 48 units, and
Mhm.
they'll all be done at about the same time. Ours will be done last because we're the last of the 4
the end.
buildings. We're like, because we wanted the unobstructed view. So we're
All
willing
right,
to.
one last question. Anybody from Denver in this? What's the town called?
Mitzpeh Yericho. So Yericho is Jericho,
Oh, Jericho. Mitzvah.
and Mitzpeh means a viewpoint, like an outlook.
Okay. So anybody from Denver at all in Mitzvah Yericho? You're the
No,
one. You're it.
we're it. Maybe there'll be other people in the future, but we're it. But we've met people who live there, and they started a WhatsApp group for people who are buying into this particular project. It's called the Fisher Project. It's Aryeh Fisher's brother. If you know Aryeh and Dorit Fisher, Dorit is Evie Makovsky's daughter. So,
Oh,
so
so it's the project is a Denver project.
no, it's his brother. It's Aryeh's brother.
Brother who's in Israel.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's a rabbi there. He has a yeshiva, and it's his project. So in that project, they started a WhatsApp group for the families that are buying into that project. And all the units are sold. They have 6 left out of the 48. So it's filling up.
Wow.
And what's happening with your Aliyah process?
My health is my priority at the moment. So
As it should be.
I am on a list of, I'm getting emails about different things of Aliyah, and so I've listened to a few of them.
Great.
So my head's there.
How are you
Um,
feeling?
I'm feeling good. Thank God.
Nice.
Feeling really good. I think I just got over, I had pneumonia for over a month.
You said you had walking
And
pneumonia. What even is
I had
that?
walking pneumonia.
What is that?
It's just, you don't have to be in bed. You're not like, you're not coming out of every orifice like when you have a bad cold or something, so that you can still get around, but very tired, and your lungs are, there's fluid or there's something going on in there. So very tired
I'm
for
sorry.
a whole month. And
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
I've been schlepping around, and thank God just I went to the doctor last week, and he was going to give me a third round of antibiotics. Actually, it would have been 3.5, because I took a half, then 2. Then he gave me a prescription for a third one. It's really funny. The pharmacy, it was 30 pills. The pharmacy only had 10. They couldn't even fill the whole thing, which is a sign. And my body said, no, I'm not doing more antibiotics. And so I found this stuff in my cupboard called Cold Snap. If you don't have it, you should get it.
I do have it.
You do have it?
Mhm.
So it's an herbal thing. It's a couple in Colorado that came up with this. And I found it, and then I started drinking it constantly for days. And I swear it did the trick. I'm so much better.
So glad to
I'm
hear
so
that.
much better. I have energy back. I'm feeling like it's about 99% out of there now. So
I'm
thank
so
God.
glad. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank God. Thank God. It's, day by day. And I think my mindset is, I don't see illness in me. It's not there.
Good for
So
you.
there.
That's right.
It's all right.
It's not there.
I'm going about my life, and I'm going to beat it.
Wonderful.
Please God. Please God.
Please
yes.
God.
Yeah, we all need to keep praying.
That's right. Keep praying and just do
I'm
what
praying for
we
myself.
can do. You should pray for yourself. I
do.
pray for you. You are
Praying
in
for
my,
myself and a friend I met at the very beginning of this, who's from Israel. She's actually was just in Israel also. So she and I pray for her and me and other people. Benjamin,
thank
I
you.
pray for.
Thank you very much.
I pray for, I have a list.
Yeah, his hearing never came back. So it's,
So he's got one side that he hears from and one side he doesn't. So he has to work on balance, like with a physical therapist or something.
his balance was restored. Thank God.
Oh, yay.
Yes.
Well, that's good. Okay.
So, it's just that being in a noisy environment is hard because he hears like noise, but it's more like feedback on a microphone kind of noise. So he's hoping they're going to test him again. They're hoping that he might be able to wear some sort of a hearing device that moves the sound from one thing to another. I didn't understand it, but something.
I'm
so that might help.
sure. Yeah, with technology, they'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Technology is amazing.
It is
So,
amazing. Thank
and
God.
I'll keep praying for him.
Thank you very much, Tova.
Yeah.
And I'll pray for you, and I'm praying for all of us. Just praying, first of all, that Corona goes away and that we can just go to Israel when we want, how we want. We don't have to have shots and vaccines and all of that stuff.
It's going to go away when Hashem decides we've learned what we need to learn. So pray we learn fast.
Exactly. We want to be
Quick
fast
learning.
learners. We need to
Quick
be
learning.
We need to be quick learners.
Get more Jewish people to tune into this. In fact, I'm going to call my sister. She called me during this call, and I'm going to call her. I'm going to say, listen to this class. Today's class was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are we still being recorded?